but he's been speaking truth to power for a long, long time, from KPFK radio to Sputnik to Fox News. Just a very, very important and popular anti-imperialist voice. So I'd like to invite Garland Nixon up to give some remarks.
Thank you. I don't know, one of these, which one? Either one? I guess, can you hear me? All right, so I'm gonna start by doing this. I like to do this. I like to go online every now and then and, find the comments, especially the bad ones. So I found this comment, obviously a bot, this is great. I'll go on X, and I search my name, and somebody writes this. Garland Nixon is a serious tool. He is a part of the far left propaganda and should be ignored. I think those last three words are kind of the key, aren't they? He should be ignored. Middle Eastern and European news stations should remove him from their list because he does not represent US views. He's out of touch and a fringe player. And I looked at it, and of course you go follow these bots down and there's like nobody following them. And they're followed by other people who has like nobody following them. And you realize you're going spinning in a rabbit hole of non-existent bots, right? And I looked at it and I thought, man, that makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to look at it, and that when the system kind of paints you as some lunatic, as some out-of-touch person that nobody should listen to, it makes me think of Gandhi. And this is not about me, but it's about all of us, right? Because we're like the crazy, lunatic misfits in the society. They don't know what we're talking about. We should be laughed at and, degraded and pushed aside, ignored, right? And it makes me think of watching, the Gandhi movie. And I remember Gandhi, if you remember that movie, and he's like in court and they're like accusing him of something, and he's like, yep, according to your rules, I'm guilty and should probably receive, the most serious sentence that you can possibly give me, right? And it's great because it's an acknowledgement that, hey, in a society where we go, look what they did with the Uhuru movement. People that tried to help poor people in their community, they tried to spread the word of, a different way of seeing things, who tried to exercise their what they thought were their rights. What happens? The government comes at them, tries to destroy them, economic sanctions against them. In a society that goes and kidnaps leaders of countries, that every 4 years we run a president who comes in and says, I'm going to do things for you, and then says, I was overruled by the Senate parliamentarian. Or just comes in and just says, yeah, I know I said all of that, but forget it, I'm gonna do something else. And you think, in a society like that, I am some kind of a lunatic propaganda person that should be ignored if in fact that's what the society really is. But it isn't, is it? The society really is, for the most part, victims of people who think like that. That's what Americans are becoming, victims of their government. Malcolm X talked about it. We're not people who are benefiting from American democracy. We're people who are suffering from American hypocrisy, right? And so in that society, the lunatics and crazy people and misfits who are saying there's something wrong, perhaps we should do certain things a certain way, are the people that should be listened to. The people that have been saying it for years, man, there's something terribly wrong here. Maybe we should do things different. And they laughed at us, and now they're so desperate. But you see, they didn't have to laugh at us before. We just looked out of place. And people were kind of comfortable, when things were kind of going at least all right. And when someone said, this thing's going in a bad direction, it's not going to work out. Hey, they're lying to you about babies being thrown out of incubators, and they're lying, in the first Iraq war. Then the second one, invasion. The second one comes about. Now it's weapons of mass destruction. And now my favorite two things that the two really things that I look back and I say, these were indicators that the people were brainwashed and we were in deep trouble. One of them was, and you'll remember this. Some people may not be old enough to remember this. They literally came up with this colored scheme thing. And it was like, okay, we're gonna know if a terrorist attack is coming. If it's green, that means no. And if it gets up to like red, and they had like orange, and then when it gets up to red, then Osama bin Laden's about to get us, right? And just before the election, for some reason, it always turned red. But the guy who was running or whatever said, well, I can take care of that and I'll save you. And the other one, and this is my favorite, this is the one. They literally told us we need to go out and get plastic and duct tape. Remember that? To put over our windows. We got to put plastic over our windows. We got to seal that with duct tape because, for some reason, Osama bin Laden is thinking, Passaic, New Jersey. Strasburg, Pennsylvania. If you live there, we're going to do a biological attack against them. But if you got duct tape and plastic over your windows, you'll be fine. I mean, I'm thinking, you probably smother, you can't get any air in, right? But nobody thought about that. It was like, okay. And I know people who went out, and then literally, I had family members who bought duct tape and plastic. And I'm like, okay, well, great. I guess, I'm thinking Nancy Pelosi probably went out and bought some stock in like 3M, made a pretty good profit off of that. But at that point, all along, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, we got problems. But the people who were saying there was something wrong with that were the lunatics. They were the misfits. They were the people in this room. They were the people that I hang out with. They were the people that watch the YouTube shows that we watch, the crazy people who look at that and say, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm crazy if I say, that doesn't make sense to me. I think you're being took. And so here we sit now, and as I've said this, it's not this is just a reality. I like to tell part of my political history, and a lot of people know Paul Robeson Jr. was a guy that I met years ago and learned a lot from him. And I'm starting to say this more and more now. And what he said was this: when you're doing activism, it ain't even about what you say; it's about when you say it. Right? So you can tell people something's wrong, there's problems here, we need to get you something different. And when they're kind of comfortable, they're like, okay, yeah, but things ain't all that bad. I got 2.5 kids in a minivan, I can make it. And they won't listen. But then when they wake up and ICE is shooting some woman in a Honda Pilot for apparently no reason, when they look around and they can't afford anything anymore, and we're kidnapping presidents, and they come to the conclusion, they're like, wait a minute, the last guy said he was going to do things, and then said he was, if you remember, it was, the Senate parliamentarian was about people were saying, Biden promised a $20 minimum wage, and he says, okay, that's going to be in the COVID bill. And then it came out of the COVID bill, and he said, I was overruled by the Senate parliamentarian. And then, of course, all of us said, but you appoint the Senate parliamentarian. Do you really think Trump would be overruled by the Senate parliament? He doesn't care about international law. I mean, not him. The people that own him don't even care about international law. But they didn't want to do a $20 minimum wage. They weren't going to do it, and they needed some kind of excuse. And the truth is, that one was as good as any. We got Build Back Better and big, beautiful bills. They like B's for some reason. Everything's starts with a B. But those things sound good. But, that was an indicator to some people that I've been had. And a lot of us even in here. Trump's running and we're like, well, maybe. Trump's saying all the right things. I didn't vote for Trump, but I know there's people maybe in here did. But I thought to myself, well, maybe he'll do something. I'm not going to vote for him. But we'll see. And, of course, he ran and it was the same thing. A bunch of promises and do the opposite. And so here we are in a situation where the crazy people who have been saying there's something wrong here and have been saying, when they stick a puppet out there, be it Trump or Biden, they don't really make the decisions. You're going to get the same thing no matter what. Now we're at a time where we're still saying the same thing, different variations of it, but the same thing. There's something wrong with the system. There's a systemic problem. But now there's people scratching their head, and there's people that would listen. That wouldn't listen before. And we don't sound as crazy as we used to sound. We're starting to sound, the crazy person is the person that says, yeah, I think this will work. Everything will be fine. Just kind of mellow out and let's see how this works out. People don't want to do that anymore because they're seeing how it works out. And they're feeling how it works out. And they're suffering from the way that it works out because it's working out. And now they're horrified because they're like, man, this thing ain't going to get better. We can see it, we're devolving into very, very difficult times. So I'm very happy to talk to groups of people that I feel aligned with I look for groups of people. You know what I look for? I look for a group that I can go on X and they can be, harangued and attacked, and they're crazy conspiracy theorists. Now, that's who I want to talk to, because that means they're onto something. The bots wouldn't do it if they weren't onto something. Because when you see the bots, you're seeing the system. And I think what it is this. I'll kind of distill it down to this. And that is, there are people who understand systemic problems. When you have a headache, okay, it could mean that you have high blood pressure, right? It's like, I have a headache, therefore, let me tell you a quick story. This was years ago. A friend of mine that I grew up with, his father got old. Bottom line, his father died of a brain tumor. And, his father was living by himself, and they went in there, and they opened the drawer, and there was Tylenol and all of these painkillers, and they came to the conclusion that he'd been having headaches for years. He didn't look into it, and it didn't dawn on him there's something more serious, and when he realized that it was a brain tumor, he passed away. He was in his 80s, and he passed away. But the bottom line was, he didn't address it systemically. I have a headache. That was presenting that there was a systemic problem. Could have been high blood pressure, could have been a brain tumor, could have been anything. And I think the people that I'm talking about, us, the people that are, abused and, pushed aside as lunatics and conspiracy theorists, are the people that tend to look below what presents it's from the system. We're the people that look at Trump and this, Trump, we had to have a no kings rally because we don't want Trump, he's terrible, everything is bad about Trump. And we're the people that say, Trump did not come into the political system in America. He came out of the political system in America. This is what is produced. I study Zen. And one of the things you look at whenever you see something, instead of saying that shouldn't be there, why is that there? That makes no sense. Of course it makes sense. Here's what I mean. If you want to grow anything, you want to grow roses, right? You want the right environment, right? Everybody knows that, like, if you grow, okay, I'm going to check the pH of the dirt. I'm going to make sure that it has just the right amount of water. Whatever you're going to grow, you're going to check to make sure the environment is right. Because if the environment isn't right, you can't grow roses or weed, whatever you want to grow. You can't grow it unless you have the right environment, right? Palm trees don't grow in Maine. The environment is not right. When you see a palm tree, that tells you that that environment produces palm trees. In the same way that an apple tree produces apples. You could look at an apple tree and say, that apple tree, apples, as a verb. You could look at this island and say, that island, palm trees, as a verb, because that environment creates palm trees. And the way people like us look at politics and say, American politics trumps, as a verb. It produces Trump. When this situation is what it is, it produced Biden. Now it produces Trump. We don't say Trump is this, Biden is this. We say there's a system that produces, and when the system gets to this point, it's going to produce something similar to that. And so what we're told is get rid of Trump and it'll be fixed. That's like saying address the headache and the high blood pressure or the brain tumor or whatever's producing the headache is going to go away. Well, we all know that we don't have to be doctors to know that's not true. It only makes sense. And so I think we're in a good place now. I mean, we're not in a good place, and we're in very dangerous times, right? But we are in a good place philosophically and politically because there is fertile ground for people to listen to alternative perspectives because it doesn't sound crazy anymore. Yes. Hey, this system's all screwed up. Where people would be like, you guys know, you go out on the street and you say, things are screwed up, we don't need this war. And there was a time when they get out of here, you lunatics. And now people are like, yeah, you got a point there. And they probably come over and talk to you where they never would before. They'll listen to you where they never would before, right? The ground is fertile right now. The time is right. And the message has not changed. And you adjust the message because you look and you see things different and you grow. And you say, well, I may have originally thought we could do things this way, but here's an option, here's another option. And you listen to other people that have other options, but what's going on now doesn't work for us. What I mean is this, I'll end up with this. Anyone who says the system's broken, when they say the system's broken, I'll say, no, it's not. The problem is you don't understand what it does. The system works perfectly, right? A system that's designed to extract money from the working class all over the world and put it in the hands of a few billionaires that you've never heard of. You don't really hear their names. The names that you're given aren't the names of the people, right? But my point is, the system does that, and it's doing that better than ever. So the problem is not that the system is broken, it's that it's working better and better. It's getting more effective and efficient at what it does. But in doing that, the better it is about taking everything out of the hands of the masses and the working class and putting it in the hands of a few billionaires, the more obvious it gets to the working class that they're getting a shaft. And the easier it becomes, you don't have to convince people of the obvious. I don't have to convince a person who's struggling that something needs to happen so they don't have to struggle anymore. They're already ready to hear it. They just want to hear some options. So, I want to thank everybody for inviting me here today. I'm very happy to be associated with everybody here today and hang out with people. And just to let you know, I'm happy to be one of the misfits and one of the crazy people and the conspiracy theories and all of that stuff. And when I read that and they're like, Garland should be ignored. And I'm like, if he was to come to me and say, you should be ignored, and I'd say, you're right, in this society I should be. But I'm not, am I? You know what I mean? Don't ask yourself whether I should be. Of course. If you want war and you want terrible things and you want to make the rich richer and nobody gets anything but a few billionaires, then I should be ignored. Should be. But you got to ask yourself, why is it that I'm not being ignored? Why is it people are starting to listen to this message again? So for all of the years that all of us have tried to, even though we might not have known what we know now, but for all of the years that we have struggled to, family members, God knows we all know that, right? Family members are diehard Democrats, oh no, Garland, you don't understand, blah, 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 you know what I mean? We all know that. But for all the years, I have family members and friends that, I would try to say something, well, I'm an independent. I'm not really into that blue-red stuff, the old, you can put on one blue shoe and one red shoe, but they're both running in the same direction, right? Those kind of things that we say. And I've got to go watch Rachel Maddow. But, some of those same family members are like, none of them are going to do anything for us. Now I don't look like the crazy person at the Christmas party, and at the Christmas party anymore. I don't look like the crazy guy sitting over there behind the turkey. But I think that means that it's dangerous times. There's dangerous times. We got to do what we got to do. We've got to keep pressure on the ruling elite to make sure that we don't go out in a nuclear blast. But I think there's really an opportunity now for alternative messages to take root. I think that the environment is there now for alternative messages to take root. So what we have to do now is double down on talking to people, double down on being strong, and don't be surprised when your message starts growing. Thank you very much, Caleb Maupin. I'm out.